The walls of royal palaces have always hidden secrets, but some whispers are louder than others. Recently, young Princess Charlotte, curious and sharp beyond her years, stumbled upon something no one could have imagined. As she wandered near the part of the palace once belonging to her late grandmother, Princess Diana, Charlotte spotted Queen Camilla as she struck a match and set a flame inside Diana's old room. But why would Camilla do such a thing? Join us as we uncover Princess Charlotte's shocking revelation about Camilla's heinous act. Charlotte's shocking discovery. It began as an ordinary afternoon in the palace, the kind of day where the grand corridors echoed only with the quiet shuffle of footsteps and the soft chime of clocks. Princess Charlotte, curious and adventurous by nature, had been wandering through the older part of the royal residence. Unlike the polished rooms used daily by the family, this section held a heavier atmosphere, as though the walls themselves guarded memories that refused to fade. One particular room always seemed to draw her in, the room that once belonged to her late grandmother, Princess Diana. Though Charlotte had never met Diana, she often heard her name whispered in family conversations, spoken with equal measures of love and sorrow. For Charlotte, the room felt like a portal to a story she desperately wanted to understand, a place where the air carried the weight of unspoken history. That day, as Charlotte pushed the door open, expecting to find the familiar stillness, she was instead met with a sight that froze her in place. Smoke curled lazily upward from the corner of the room. The scent of burning fabric stung her nose, and there, shockingly, stood Queen Camilla, bent low with something in her hand, something glowing faintly, like a match that had only just been snuffed out. Charlotte's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. She had not expected anyone to be there.
The focus has shifted to the futures of monarchy, the United Kingdom, and the Commonwealth.
Let alone Camilla, who seemed startled when she realized the child was watching. For a moment, silence hung thick in the air. Then, Camilla straightened, her expression caught somewhere between guilt and irritation, as though she had been caught in the middle of something that should never have been witnessed. The young princess did not fully understand what she was seeing, but she knew instinctively that it was wrong. The old room was sacred in its own way, a symbol of Diana's memory. Why would anyone, especially Camilla, be there with fire in hand? To Charlotte, it was like watching a secret war between the past and the present, and she had stumbled right into the battlefield. Her little heart pounded as she stepped further into the room, her voice trembling yet brave enough to ask, "What are you doing here?" The question, simple as it was, seemed to echo against the faded walls like an accusation. Camilla's response was hurried, her words quick and uneasy, as though trying to cover something that could not truly be hidden. She muttered about clearing old things and tidying up, but the explanation felt thin, like a curtain that barely concealed what was behind it. Charlotte's gaze drifted to the smoldering corner, where a piece of old fabric, perhaps part of Diana's belongings, had clearly been scorched. The sight stirred something protective in her, even though she was too young to understand all the layers of tension that had long surrounded her grandmother's legacy.
In reality, she was chastised by the media and stifled by the conservative royal family.
All she knew was that the room, Diana's room, deserved respect. What made the moment more haunting was the silence that followed. Outside the windows, the gardens glowed with evening light, the world continuing as if nothing had happened. But inside the room, a child had walked into a discovery that could never be unseen. Charlotte's innocence collided with the weight of palace secrets, creating a memory that would cling to her far longer than she could imagine. In that instant, Charlotte wasn't just a curious little girl exploring an old room. She became a silent witness to something larger, something unsettling that tied together the living and the dead, the past and the present. And though she said nothing more, the look in her eyes, a mix of shock, confusion, and quiet defiance, spoke louder than words ever could. Did Camilla's expression say it all? Let's find out. Camilla's strange behavior. For years, people had whispered about Camilla's uneasy presence in the royal family. While she often appeared calm and controlled in public, there were times when her behavior seemed oddly unsettled, as if she carried a heavy burden that no one else could see. Those who watched closely noticed the way her expressions shifted too quickly, the way her words sometimes carried a sharpness that did not match the moment. Behind her polished appearance was a woman wrestling with emotions far more complicated than she let on. The strange act that drew everyone's attention did not happen in an instant. It was the result of many quiet tensions building up over time. Camilla had lived in the long shadow of Diana, the beloved princess, whose memory still lingered in the very walls of the palace. Every corner, every photograph, and every mention of Diana reminded the world of a comparison that Camilla could never fully escape. No matter how many years passed, Diana's presence remained powerful, and that presence weighed heavily on Camilla. Her behavior on that day was dramatic because it was not only about the act itself, but about what had been brewing inside her for decades. Camilla was a woman who had been judged, criticized, and sometimes even shunned by the public. To her, Diana was not only a memory, but a symbol of everything she could never be: the adored figure, the people's princess. This sense of being trapped in someone else's shadow began to grow into a kind of frustration that slowly colored her thoughts and actions. It was in Diana's old room that Camilla's emotions seemed to boil over. The room, carefully kept as it had once been, held more than just furniture and belongings. It carried an atmosphere thick with memory and reverence.
Charlotte, the only daughter of the Prince and Princess of Wales, turns 10 years old on May 2nd.
To many, it was almost sacred. But for Camilla, stepping into that space must have felt like stepping into a place where she did not belong, a reminder of her own controversial history. In that charged moment, her actions began to take a strange turn. The suspicious act she committed did not come from reason or careful planning, but from an emotional storm. Years of being misunderstood, judged, and compared had finally pushed her to do something reckless. The pressure of living under constant scrutiny and the ghost of Diana's memory seemed to push her over the edge. The act was dramatic because it was not ordinary. It shocked those who saw it, leaving them wondering what could have driven her to such extremes. What made her behavior even more unsettling was the secrecy surrounding it. She did not act as though she wanted to be caught. Instead, she seemed desperate to conceal her intentions, glancing over her shoulder and moving with a nervous energy that revealed both guilt and determination. That combination of secrecy and recklessness made the scene all the more suspicious. Camilla's behavior also revealed the complexity of her position within the royal family. She was not only a wife, but also a figure constantly tied to a history she could never erase. The world had already formed its opinion of her long before she had the chance to shape her own image. Every smile, every step, every public appearance was judged against Diana's memory. It was this relentless comparison that left her vulnerable to moments of weakness. What happened in that room was not simply an impulsive choice. It was the breaking point of years of tension. It was a cry from someone who felt overshadowed, judged, and unwanted in the eyes of the public. How did Princess Charlotte respond to the incident? Let's find out. Charlotte's quick reaction. Princess Charlotte had never expected to stumble into such a shocking moment. One instant, she was walking calmly through the palace corridors, her thoughts filled with the usual mixture of curiosity and wonder, and the next, she was standing frozen, her eyes locked on a scene that made her heart pound. The quiet of the old royal chambers had always carried with it a kind of mystery, but now those mysteries seemed darker, more urgent, and almost dangerous. And Charlotte was still very young, yet her instincts were sharp. She had been taught since childhood that being a royal was not only about wearing fine dresses and attending grand banquets, it was also about carrying herself with courage when the unexpected happened. At that very moment, her training seemed to take control before she even had the time to think. The first thing she felt was fear, a cold wave that rushed through her chest. But fear did not paralyze her. Instead, it pushed her to act. With a deep breath, she steadied herself and blinked hard, as if to make sure she was not imagining things. What she saw was real, far too real, and she knew she could not waste time. Charlotte's quick reaction was remarkable for someone her age. Rather than scream or burst into tears, she chose clarity. Her eyes darted across the room, scanning for anything that might help her. She noticed the heavy curtains, the polished wood of the furniture.
It all went down during the family's visit to Germany. The royals were set to board a helicopter.
and the faint smell of smoke in the air. Each detail sharpened her awareness, making her understand how urgent the situation was. Her first decision was to leave quietly, but swiftly. She knew that if she made too much noise, the person inside might notice her and try to stop her. Holding her breath, Charlotte stepped back slowly, her shoes making the faintest sound on the marble floor. Every second felt stretched, as though time itself was hesitating alongside her. But once she reached the safety of the corridor, she broke into a sprint. Her small feet pattered quickly against the stone passageways as she ran toward the nearest guard. The long halls of the palace had never felt so endless, but Charlotte's determination carried her forward. Her mind replayed what she had just witnessed, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized the danger it posed, not only to her family, but to the memory of the late Princess Diana, whose old room now carried this strange and suspicious act. Charlotte's voice shook when she finally found the guard, but she wasted no words. She spoke clearly, her tone urgent. Something was happening in Diana's room, something that needed immediate attention. The guard at first looked startled, not used to hearing such direct words from the young princess, but her wide eyes and hurried breath convinced him she was telling the truth. Even after delivering the warning, Charlotte did not stop. Her quick mind told her that her role was not only to raise the alarm but also to protect those around her. She rushed further down the hall to find her mother, knowing that Queen Catherine had to be informed at once. The thought of her mother gave her strength. If there was anyone who would know what to do, it was her. When she burst into her mother's chamber, her cheeks flushed and her hair slightly loosened from the run, Catherine immediately recognized the seriousness of her daughter's face. Charlotte quickly explained what she had seen, her voice a mixture of fright and determination. Catherine did not doubt her for a second. The queen gathered herself, sent messengers running, and moved with calm authority that reassured Charlotte. Only then did Charlotte allow herself a brief moment to catch her breath. Her hands trembled slightly, but she held her chin high. Deep inside, she knew she had done the right thing. Though still young, she had managed to act with the kind of courage that many adults might have struggled to show. In the hours that followed, Charlotte's quick reaction became the central story within the palace walls. Servants whispered about her bravery. Guards admired her sharpness, and her family looked at her with a new sense of pride. She had not only reacted with speed, but also with wisdom, making sure that the situation did not spiral further out of control. But for Charlotte, the experience left something more lasting than praise. It gave her a sense of responsibility that felt heavier than ever before. She realized that her role as a princess was more than symbolic. It meant being alert, aware, and ready to act in the face of danger. Even though she was young, the safety of the palace and the honor of her family were things she could help protect. That night, as she lay in her bed, Charlotte replayed the event again and again in her mind. She thought of how close she had been to danger, how easily she could have stayed silent, and how different the outcome might have been if she had hesitated. Instead, she chose action, and that choice revealed the kind of person she was becoming: strong, courageous, and unwilling to let fear silence her. Could Camilla's action further trigger the rift that is already sweeping through the royal family? Let's take a closer look. Royal family tension. The royal family has always lived under the bright lights of public attention, where every word, action, and expression is closely watched, recorded, and discussed. For generations, they have been symbols of tradition, unity, and continuity. Yet, behind the elegant walls of palaces and the polished smiles seen during official appearances, the royal household has been marked by rivalries, hidden grudges, and old wounds that never fully healed. This particular incident did not just spark whispers in the press, it pulled the curtain back on simmering conflicts that had been waiting for the right moment to resurface. What was once carefully hidden beneath duty and formality burst into the open, reigniting rivalries that had their roots deep in history. When this moment unfolded, it was as though a flame had been set to dry grass. Long-standing tensions, built over years of competition, jealousy, and hurt feelings, came alive once more. The royal family has always been made up of individuals with their own ambitions and emotions, but because they live within a strict system that demands loyalty to tradition and image, their personal struggles are often forced into silence. Still, silence does not erase pain. It only buries it deeper. So when this incident occurred, it gave old resentments the air they needed to breathe again. Some members of the family saw it as a betrayal, while others felt it was simply history repeating itself. There were echoes of past arguments, whispers of earlier betrayals, and reminders of conflicts that had never truly been resolved. It was not the first time that hidden feelings boiled over in the royal household. Each generation seems to inherit not just crowns and titles, but also scars left behind by those who came before them. A family so tied to the past cannot escape the weight of memory, and so every fresh argument feels heavier than it would in an ordinary family. What could have been a simple disagreement in any other household transformed into a drama that carried the shadows of decades. This particular clash reminded everyone of wounds that dated back many years. There were disagreements over loyalty, questions of trust, and deep suspicions that refused to fade. Some of these rivalries stretched back to the days of Princess Diana, whose tragic story left lasting marks on the family. Others were tied to more recent disputes, modern arguments about roles, responsibilities, and the struggle between tradition and personal freedom. It was as though this single incident pressed a button that opened up a chest full of painful memories. Suddenly, everything that had been politely ignored for years came rushing back into the light. The rivalry was not just about personalities, but also about power. In the royal household, who gets attention matters almost as much as who holds titles. Public favor can shift the balance of influence, and with it comes pride, jealousy, and rivalry. When the incident happened, it was clear that it was not just about what was done in that moment. It was about what it represented. To some, it felt like an attempt to push certain members into the shadows, while others saw it as a bold statement that old rules no longer applied. That symbolism made the wound even deeper, because it was not just personal. It was about the very identity of the family and how its story would be told to the world. As news of the tension spread, the outside world reacted with fascination. To the public, it was another royal scandal, a piece of drama to be read in headlines and debated in living rooms. But inside the palace, the emotions were not entertainment. They were real, raw, and painful. Words once spoken in anger could not be taken back. What made the whole situation even heavier was the fact that many of these rivalries were not between distant relatives, but between those who had once shared close bonds. Cousins, siblings, and even in-laws found themselves on opposite sides of invisible lines, pulled apart by loyalty to different figures within the family. The palace corridors, once filled with the formal politeness of duty, now carried an unspoken tension. Every glance, every silence, seemed to carry more meaning than it should. Behind the formality of public events, there was the heavy weight of mistrust. This incident reminded the world that even those who appear to live perfect royal lives are still human. They love, they hurt, they compete, and they carry grudges just like any other family. But unlike ordinary people, they do so under the gaze of millions. And in the case of the royal family, those grudges do not fade quietly in the background. They shape history, influence the future, and echo far beyond palace walls. The reopening of these wounds also carried a lesson about how the past never truly disappears. The royal family is bound by its history, and every action seems to link back to something that came before. It is a chain of memory, and when one link rattles, the sound carries through the entire line. The incident might have seemed small in the moment, but what it stirred up was much larger. A storm of unresolved emotions, of rivalries that had never been settled, and of questions that continue to hang in the air. Did the palace try to hide the situation from the public eyes? Let's find out. Palace Fire Cover-Up Story. The palace was shaken to its core after the shocking attempt to set fire inside its walls. The corridors that usually carried only whispers of tradition and quiet footsteps now echoed with hurried voices, rushed orders, and nervous tension. What had happened was too serious to be ignored, yet it was also too dangerous to be openly admitted. The palace, with all its grand history and royal pride, could not afford to let the world know that something so alarming had taken place under its roof. Servants were quickly gathered and strict instructions were given. Every detail of the incident was to be kept quiet, hidden away as though it had never happened. The smell of smoke still clung to the curtains and walls of the old room, but the staff worked tirelessly to scrub away the traces, replacing fabrics, polishing the floors, and making sure that not even the smallest reminder remained. It was as though the palace itself was erasing the memory of what had taken place, sweeping it into the shadows. Officials close to the family began carefully crafting their words. They knew that stories had a way of slipping out, especially when something this startling had occurred. So they prepared explanations in advance, soft and harmless versions of the truth that could be released if anyone asked too many questions. The fire, they decided, would not be spoken of as a fire at all. Instead, it would be described as a small incident, perhaps the result of a faulty candle or a minor electrical fault, something that could be easily dismissed, nothing to stir the public or feed rumors of deeper troubles within the family. Behind the scenes, though, the tension was impossible to disguise. The royals themselves were unsettled, for the act had not been random. It carried meaning. The attempt on Diana's old room touched an old wound.
I made many friends who I often see, and in spite of what
one that had never fully healed. It was a place tied to memory, loss, and pain, and the idea that someone had tried to destroy it with flames felt like an attack on more than just bricks and mortar. It was as if history itself had been threatened, and that realization spread unease among them all. The younger royals, who had not lived through the darker chapters of family history, were the most disturbed. They had grown up surrounded by memories of the past, but never before had it come so close. Never before had it turned so dangerous. Their worried faces revealed what the officials tried so hard to hide, that something was terribly wrong, that beneath the polished surface of the monarchy, cracks were widening. So, what do you think about Queen Camilla's actions in Diana's old room? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe.